And then the people that are using your product, wait, this was here last week and now I have to do it this way this time. And oh, wait, it used to work like that. It's just too much for them.
For sure. Oh, that's so frustrating, right? When an interface changes, users hate that.
Exactly. Even if it looks better and it works better, the initial reaction is, I hate this until they spend a little bit of time with it and get to use it.
Hello, Andy. How are you?
I'm great, Jen. How are you?
I'm really, really well. It's so great to see you.
You too. It's been a while and I'm so happy that you asked me to be part of this.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on. I'm excited to be having you here. Let me start off with a fun question. What's something that a lot of people may not know about you?
My life is a bit of an open book. I've talked through having wrestled professionally before getting into design. I've talked about one of my first companies that I worked at. We had an anthrax attack. Those are somewhat interesting facts, but I think maybe what's probably the most interesting to me or about me now is I travel a lot for work. The last two jobs I've had, I've not been in the city that I live in. So I've spent a lot of time in office with people, building relationships, like making sure that the team's message is being amplified and the connections that I'm making are all like worthwhile and deep. And I think that people, when they hear that, they're like, wow, that seems like it's so hard, right? It's interesting because it allows me to one, separate work and home a little bit, but also there are things when I'm home that I have to do because I'm home. And when I'm traveling for work, I'm more in work mode and relationship building mode and team building mode. And it really allows me to focus on the job and the people a little bit deeper. It's been interesting. It's had its challenges, right? Of course, but really, we've been able to accelerate outcomes in ways that I don't know that I could have at my level if I didn't get a chance to build those connections where most people are, right? The team is fully distributed, it's flexible. I see them in the office certain days and certain people. But in the last two places I've been, the executive teams, they're in the office, right? They come in. It's being the one face on the screen is it's fine, obviously, but I feel there are conversations that happen that I need to be involved in to accelerate the development and advancement of design as quickly as possible.
Great. So, Andy, do you think that being in person benefits you because you're new on the job or because of your interaction with, say, senior leaders?
I think a little bit of both. I think for me, being new on the job, being able to jump into multiple conversations as they happen and get up to speed is one thing. I think the other thing are the senior leader conversations, right? It's not just the meeting that happens, the debriefing of the meeting that sometimes happens and other planning and jump to the whiteboard and do a thing. That probably isn't the same everywhere. It just happened to be the last two companies that I was at. My role as a chief design officer here is we know everywhere, right? The organization, they've got to bend to design in certain ways, but it doesn't happen without design bending to meet them where they are. And in this instance, it's about meeting the companies where they are so that we can continue on this journey forward. And then once we're in that place, then I don't probably have to travel nearly as much. It'll just be for key things. But right now, it's really important for me to have the right face time and being able to walk by someone's office and be like, hey, you have a second? Let me show you this thing that we're thinking or doing. And that's been more beneficial than a ping on Slack or something.
Sure, that makes sense. So, Andy, how did you break into UX?
Like most people that have been in it 20 plus years, kind of by accident and self-learning, but also with a design background. So my initial degree was in graphic design. It was digital graphic design. After a couple of jobs, the Anthrax job that I mentioned, I went back to teach. And the first campus that I was able to teach at was so far from my house that I would have to go there in the morning and I would teach day and night classes. So I teach the morning class that would end around 1 o'clock. The night class would start around 5 or 5:30, but it was an hour and a half each way from my house. So it didn't make sense to go home and then drop my stuff off, look at TV for a half hour and then drive back. But all right, I'm going to stay here. And while that was happening, this was probably 2002-ish, 2003-ish. All of these emerging disciplines were coming, like interaction design, information architecture, content strategy. I was like, these are interesting. These are a little bit different than just teaching the class photo manipulation or page layout skills or web design skills. So I started to read about them and I started to, okay, if I can learn this for myself, how do I apply it to my students? How do I apply it to my learnings and help them learn? And the thing that I actually learned through all of that is you really learn something when you have to teach it, because the questions people ask, show me this, do this, you have to know it well enough to be able to not just teach someone it, but answer any question about it. So I started to add it to lessons and projects and get really good at it. And after a few years of teaching it, I was like, wow, I'm teaching this and I know it well, but I'm not going out and applying it myself. So I decided to stop teaching and go back into the field and actually start applying it. So self-taught up until that point, and then eventually I went back and got my master's degree in user experience design because I wanted to have the foundational knowledge of the core principles that maybe you don't always learn when you pick them up yourself, to have intelligent enough conversations around them to be able to convince people the way you articulate your design decisions in a way that sounds more rigorous and scientific than just opinion. So that's my journey.
Cool. Yeah, I have a similar journey with a journalism design background. So you touched upon something I want to revisit, and that is the foundations of graphic design. And you also said how you went back to grad school to get some of the UX foundation. Well, how do you feel about the importance of those foundations?
Really important, right? I think that without having core principles, without really understanding best practices and the why behind them, then everything else becomes a little bit subjective and subject to a lot of current trends. And I think when you think of true great interfaces, great experiences, they're grounded in those principles, from even the graphic design ones like typography and the way that that flows in a design system to make sense. So it doesn't look like there's 12 different size fonts on the same screen that can confuse people that are using it, or just application of color, but then to core interaction principles and how people behave and how to meet their mental model. We all try really hard to change the way people behave. There are just core ways that people do things that you have to build upon. You can't expect to have someone do something completely different than their mind work or than they ever have before and expect that to be successful. You can teach them how to modify certain behaviors and get used to certain things and apply those psychological principles to help them achieve a desired outcome. But if you don't know what they are, a lot of guesswork. A lot of what we do is hypothesis driven, and we try to validate those. And half of the time, or more than half of the time, if we're doing a good job, we're actually wrong. But then we understand what the right thing is from learning those lessons. So without those, you just introduce more risk, and it puts more time and involvement in the discovery and keep learning and learning. And you never get anything that shifts because you're actually recreating every time. And it takes so much time to go back. And then the people that are using your product are, wait, this was here last week and now I have to do it this way this time. And oh, wait, it used to work like that. It's just too much for them.
For sure. Oh, that's so frustrating, right? When an interface changes, users hate that.
Exactly. Even if it looks better and it works better, the initial reaction is, I hate this, until they spend a little bit of time with it and get to use it.
So, Andy, what's on your mind these days?
We are working heavily with AI, and AI is top of mind to me. What comes next? Like right now, the way that people, companies talk about AI, it's kind of, you used to hear, let's get the team to sprinkle a little UX on it. Right now, let's sprinkle a little UI on it. I mean, AI on it. And what's interesting is AI powered experiences are table stakes now. And people don't need to know or hear, and some customers fear even the word AI. But really, it's the way that we are able to access information, and it's the speed in which we process data. I remember working in AI back at 3M in 2015, 2016, and we were working with auto-suggested coding for hospitals that do medical billing on what a principal diagnosis would be. And everyone was like, I don't trust this machine. I know this information. But then eventually they changed the classification and it needed more specificity. And they had this big book they had to go through. And they're like, well, wait, let's see what you generate and let me check that and see if it's right. And that turned into like helping train the model plus natural language processing and how they read doctor's notes to understand. And those are early days of AI, but we never called them AI. It was just an advanced way of computing. And now people use generative AI a lot for text or some images. And then it's funny, it does text and it does images, but when you generate images with text, it's a mess. But it is making people do less tedious things faster, but still exercise their brain. A lot of times I will use generative AI to write a couple of bullet points, add some meat to these bones, right? And then I look at it, there's a couple of things I want to change. And then I say, all right, well, write it in a more casual tone. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to just go through a 10-minute edit and not have to worry about that blank page for 30 minutes. What we're doing is leveraging AI. We released a feature called Campaign Builder just recently. A marketer can go ahead and say, hey, with their own word, what do they want to do? And we will go ahead and say, okay, you want to tell us that you're going to have a sale on t-shirt, and we will start to generate for you based on that. This is the email that you'll send to communicate that. This is a text message you can send to communicate that. This is a social media post to communicate that. And we will schedule it for you as well. We're leveraging AI to make our customers' lives easier and make them better marketers. We're not trying to replace what they do. We're trying to let them focus on running their business, which is what a lot of small businesses are really focused with. Not how do I send this message and how do I craft this great marketing piece or marketing campaign. No, I want to bake cookies and I want to make the best cookies that people will come. But if you tell them you have a sale on Saturday, more of them will come and buy. We leverage AI as that. It's more of I look at it more like a coach.
Sure. So how has the feedback been so far on some of the AI tools that you're providing to your customers?
It's been really good. People aren't intimidated by it. They see it as helpful. A lot of them like to write things themselves in their own words, and they maybe just use the way that you change the style of the writing. Image generation is it's still got some work to do across the board. So we're learning what our customers want and figuring out how to get them that a little bit easier. But at the same time, we're able to help pull in certain components of their brand. So whenever they go to generate an image, we have their images for them. So it's been good. The feedback's been overwhelmingly positive.
Great. You mentioned a couple instances. How are you or your team using AI in some of your work?
It helps me write better internal communication to my team. Whenever I'm trying to figure out the right thing to say to my team, sometimes it's short, sometimes it's too detailed, sometimes it's too meandering. And how do I get it to the right level of detail that conveys what I want it to convey and not spend 15 cycles on it? We don't really use AI in terms of the design that we do. We're not looking to manipulate images. Our marketing team, I'm sure, uses Photoshop's generative AI tool. We don't. We do most of our work in Figma, and the AI tools there are not yet up to par of what we would need. There's a lot of ways product managers will use AI to write better user stories. Really, it's still helping a lot with writing. I think communication is a really important and crucial piece to collaboration and overall success of an organization. And if our biggest win, the way we use AI to improve that, then to me, that's meeting the need that we have.
Absolutely. That's a huge win for sure.
But we're also exploring all of the possibilities of AI so that we can start to really understand how we can bring it to other parts of our product.
Right. And providing that value for your customers.
Right, exactly.
You mentioned you were using AI back in 2015 at 3N. Do you feel like it's becoming more acceptable or the norm to use AI in different ways?
I think so. It's comparable. I was having a conversation with our chief product officer yesterday, and I was like, yeah, everyone's got an AI feature, but really it's just a feature. When do we take the word AI out of it? And he's like, well, we just went through that with big data. He's like, everyone was hot for big data. Now it's just data, right? It's personalized data. So I think we're going through the same thing with AI. It's a new feature. It's got interest. Everyone feels like, oh, if I add this, it makes me look like I'm understanding the needs of the market and I'm up to speed. But eventually it just goes away and it becomes part of how we work and what we do. It becomes natural. And we haven't even seen AI on quantum computing or anything. But emerging technology is always an exciting field, but it's always a little bit risky, right? Because anytime we introduce something new that we aren't fully sure of the capability of it or harm that it can cause or the right way to use it, and we operate at the speed that we need to get to market, we've seen time after time after time as a technology industry, we've made certain mistakes that we always hope that we won't make them again. You read the thing with OpenAI and Scarlett Johansson and what's going on there and how they backtrack from that. But there's a lot of people talking already about ethical AI and how that works. And to me, the fact that we're already focusing on that makes me feel more optimistic that we will do better. We won't be perfect, but we will do better as an industry this time around than we have in the past.
Sure. Yeah, I like that too, that there is that human component of let's consider the implications and the ethical implications of what this could be doing,
Right.
having a conversation around that.
Exactly.
What do you wish people who are outside of user experience, what do you wish they knew or they understood a little bit better that maybe they just don't?
I think that I would like people to understand a couple of things. One, that it's okay for designers to push people out of their comfort zone and that they shouldn't feel so threatened by it. And threatened is the wrong word. They shouldn't feel uncomfortable by what they see. They should embrace it and find out how to bring it even better and quicker to life. There are times where I've seen design teams create something that feels or has been called visionware, right? How do you get people inspired about an end state? And I've heard, how do we make this real? How we take it from what this design concept or prototype is requires a product management team to collaborate, to write stories, to figure out how we break this down into different iterations and different versions to get there. It requires an engineering team to deeply understand what we can do technologically and push back on what is realistic, what isn't realistic, and then have those conversations around time versus speed to market, level of effort, cost of what it's going to take to bring it to life, what we expect the outcome to be for the people that use the product plus the business. And I want that open, constant dialogue. I like to call it internally on the design side, creative conflict. It's just each team holding each other accountable for the best outcomes for our customers. And that level of ambiguity seems to be more comfortable for a lot of designers than it is for other people. I want them to embrace and have the trust that like, we're not off going wild. It's very collaborative. And the end state is we don't know when the end state is and things will change between there. Let's find ways to break that down. I think that's the first thing that like would be great for people to know. The second thing for people to know is focusing on the outcomes for the customer will lead to the business value, right? You can't just say, okay, here's a business idea. We've now created a solution. Now we need to go find problems that match to the solution. Let's deeply understand the people and what provides value to them so that they can decide then, okay, I like this company. They're meeting my needs. I will give them my money. And sometimes we don't always start there. And I was having another conversation yesterday with a few folks, and you often hear there's a corporate strategy or a business strategy, and then that translates to a product strategy. You hear that when you're on a product team. When you're on a sales team, you hear there's a corporate strategy and it has to lead to a sales strategy. You hear on the marketing team, corporate strategy, marketing strategy. And when you look at that and everyone goes off and tries to tackle or translate that strategy in their own way, everyone's going in different directions, the arrows of chaos, right? So the way I look at it is you actually need a corporate strategy, and then you can't win with any other single strategy. You need a customer experience strategy to ground that so that every other group is going in the same direction, solving the same problem for the same type of customer, so that the experience is as seamless as possible. Because if we're all looking at a journey and everyone's tackling a different piece of it, it's not going to be the same. So like when someone's on our homepage and they see a message and they submit a lead and then the salesperson calls them and they've got a different goal that they're going after. They're having a different conversation than the person's used to. And then they use the product and it doesn't match and they get an email from marketing. How do we understand where they are from that life cycle, or think about it from a service design lens or service and experience lens, to really make sure that we're aligned to not create more swirl for our customers? Those are the hot things that I wish people knew or are top of mind at the moment.
Sure. So let me ask you, what comes first, business strategy or customer experience strategy?
So I think it depends on the maturity of the organization. I think that it's really important for most organizations to have a very clear business strategy. And I think that there's a lot of places that don't have it. I think that in places I've worked in the past, we've struggled. We're getting the business strategy in the middle of like Q1 or at the end of Q1 for the year. Companies all need a business strategy. They need a charting of the course of the ship to be able to align on what problems are important for our customers, for our business. I think as companies get more and more mature, the customer strategy influences the business strategy. It takes a little bit of time to get there and a little bit of trust to be earned, because companies hire people familiar with the business, familiar with the market, familiar with the problem, and they're there to drive that ship. And then at some point they start to say, okay, now I need more input. Now what I thought got us so far, now what else is going to change? What else do we have to think about? And that's when the customer experience strategy will influence the business strategy. But I'm okay with it tying that together to get everyone else aligned when you need it. I don't want to call it a wrapper, but it's the right wrapper of merging those business and customer problems at the same time and challenges.
So what are some tactics that you have seen or used to tie those two together, the customer experience and or customer experience strategy and the business strategy?
I think research is key. There's different types of research. There's understanding our users, there's understanding our customers, there's understanding their sentiment, but there's also understanding the market and trends and challenges that are coming, and understanding how your brand is positioned in the market, right? All of those pose different challenges. Companies at the end of the day, their goal is to be profitable, right? Unless they're a nonprofit, and then they've got goals to solve a specific need, but also maintain enough capital to keep the business running. So at the end of the day, it is down to like finance, but they realize that that finance is generated based on the outcomes that they deliver to the market, to the people. Another one is just, it's conversation, it's collaboration, right? It's coming with different lenses and vision. So we know, at least at my company, that the product roadmap is what we go by, but we've also started to build an experience roadmap. So what do we think are important for the customer? Now, at some point we come together. Most of the time we have conversations before we go off and do these things so that they're generally aligned. But we come back together and we discuss it and we say, hey, this roadmap, when we set it 2 months ago, you were thinking about this problem and you've set aside a quarter to do this work. But from what we're learning, what we're hearing, we actually think that this is a bigger opportunity to provide value. How do we actually move this ahead? How do we get this going? And it's just discussion. When I came here, I had a meeting. It was the Design Steer Co. And it was every once a month-ish, maybe every other week, where design would have this seat and talk to some of the things that were important, some of the opportunities we're going after. When I came in, we modified the Design Steer Co. The first one that I did was I walked our executive team through our current experience. And sometimes people don't go through the front door, right? There's that old story of, I walked into this restaurant, one of the lights were out. I mentioned it to the owner, and he's like, oh, I would have never known. I always go in through the back door. I don't see it in the front. It's good to get that alignment of where we're at. And then it starts to have that conversation of what people think are top of mind to, oh, we've got to solve this. We've got to solve this. So just having that avenue to have that healthy discussion and debate and really come to an understanding of the problem. That's where research, to me, is part of the design umbrella. At some point in mature enough companies, research stands alone and becomes another valid input on a biz dev side, on a market research side. But for the sake of this conversation, design and all of the aspects within it, all the disciplines, it's meant for facilitation of these types of conversations and bringing different lenses together so that everyone just sits in that moment of what we know and what we don't know and finds that path forward. And I think the more that we can have those conversations and sessions, the more aligned we are and the better outcomes we have. Because by doing it, by having something to react to, by having some sort of stimuli to talk through, it's very different when you're actually working together than when you have that conversation really quick and then everyone seems aligned. And then when they leave, everyone goes back to doing separate things. So it's our way of just bringing that together.
Yeah, that makes sense. So tell me a bit more about that experience roadmap. What's in it? How do you make it?
Yeah. So we just did our first one. So it's an experiment. We thought about all of the different channels that we have. So our native mobile web, where we can see AI as a possibility in our desktop experience. And then we thought through all the different features that we have and where the most gaps are in watching people use our product, or what are some new things that we want to offer based on where we're seeing pain points or the industry going. And we put together, if I'm on native mobile, these are the things that we have to have. Do we even have some of the table stakes everywhere? And if we don't, okay, we need to do them. And then we started to map those based on like key drivers for people, key drivers for the business. And then what is the end-to-end experience across those channels? Can I do everything in each channel? Or does MWeb only take you so far because of the resources that we have? And then it has to drive you to either the desktop experience or the native experience. And then one takes you as far as it makes sense to because of what you need to do. And so what are the jobs to be done for each of those channels? And how do we make sure that those jobs are done successfully? And then we start to put timelines on it. We look at the product roadmap and say, okay, we're working on this for Q2 or Q3, but does that make sense? Does this other thing that we uncovered on a quick deep dive on a strategy or a problem, can we move that up forward and push something else out? Now, those decisions are part of the product roadmap, so we can try to influence them and show that there's different value that we can bring forward faster. So we had our first conversation and it turned into, it was a great conversation. There's still a bunch of unknowns. Another smaller group of people got in a room at the end later in the day that day to work on at least one of those channels. And now there's another meeting tomorrow. So it's been highly productive. It's a new lens that we're trying to figure out in hopes that at one point, when we actually do our road planning, that we just come with all the different perspectives. But sometimes things are already set in motion and you got to find ways to influence them and optimize them and modify them for the better as you go.
So it sounds like a great complement to a product roadmap, because the product roadmap, in theory, is about the product, right? But it takes people to use that product.
Exactly.
Check out all my interviews with industry leaders on BlatzChatz.